Hello everybody, welcome back to Language Litigation and Integration Part 84, Vaccine Mandate. So we're going to break down the Supreme Court ruling, and then we're going to talk about relevant reactions from some more of our wonderfully awesome podcasting teams we have out there. But I'm going to and then give you my thoughts, opinions, and then just talk about anything relevant. So, as everyone has heard, there was a majority ruling of 6-3 from the Supreme Court to block OSHA's issued mandate, except for healthcare workers, for private businesses with people over 100 employees for being unlawful with a stay. And it affects about 84.2 million employees, which was issued, the mandate was issued on November 5th, 2021. And just, the stay was issued. What is a stay? Just a delay. Hold your horses, can't do that, but just a delay. Most literally in legal discourse. So that's the direct ruling. And so now what I did is I read the opinions in its entirety diligently, took notes along the way, just like I do with like any book or the movie review, just anything in the writing that really stands out to me as inconsistent with legal discourse. And what I see as an incorrect interpretation of law. And again, this is Judge Plumplug. I'm the whole court's right here. But just going through their writing points first. Again, I'm not sure who wrote the majority opinion. If it was the Supreme Court is Chief Justice John Roberts Jr., Clarence Thomas, Stephen Breyer, Samuel Alito, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Barrett. 9-justice court. Don't even know their alleged political affiliations, don't care. But the Occupational Safety and Health Administration is under the Department of Labor. The department is designed to ensure occupational safety. Occupational is in italics. There's a lot of like added emphasis, statute precedent cited in there. So my notation is not going to be exact because again I don't have a law clerk. For example, anybody else out there just double check Remember, our definition is actively reading and writing. Our Supreme Court justices, such as Sotomayor, can't even get the facts before going into a hearing. Amy Barrett can't even understand common law, and the actual opinions aren't really written by these people at all. They produce the substance, the meat of the legal argument, and they have somebody else write it. So having a Supreme Court justice not write their own opinions to me is barnacles. Absolutely, again, it's delusional. It's insanity. Remember, once you get elected and you get your prestige, then you just fade off and just sit there and how great you are. Again, everyone on all the justices of the Supreme Court, list everyone else that's been on the Supreme Court. That's kind of how relevant you guys are. No one really cares. Issued for the mandate was issued for emergency temporary standards without notice, comment, or a public hearing, which requires that employees are exposed to grave danger from exposure to substances or agents determined to be toxic or physically harmful, or from new hazards, and that, quote, emergency standard is necessary to protect employees from such danger. Meaning, if you want to issue an emergency requirement from OSHA, it has to, typically they come with notice or comment in public hearing, and without so it has to meet certain the two requirements. This has been issued 9 times before, I think 6 of which have been challenged, and only 1 being fully upheld. They discuss the separation of powers as being a primary reason, as in the executive overstepped their bounds, again without direct explicit authorization from Congress. Administrative agencies are creatures of statute. I just wrote that down because that just sounds, again, like a weird thing for a justice to write, or a law clerk. I forget whose opinion this is. I don't know who wrote the majority. Which cannot exceed the authority Congress has granted, and this is no everyday exercise of federal power. Correct, and this is also the first global pandemic in a literal 100 years is no everyday extreme danger. We expect Congress to speak clearly when authorizing an agency to exercise powers of vast economic and political significance. And remember, this is really coming from, again, what the Constitution does, and I'll talk about reviewing the Constitution, my thoughts on rereading it again. but just getting through the opinion. But the point here is, the motivation of the Constitution was political interest. They don't have they had the Articles of Confederation, but it started with states. Like, there were states and then a constitution for a federal government. That's why the things are reserved to the states that aren't explicitly allocated to the federal government. What defines the workplace? And that's me. And then he says, whoever the justice is says, we cannot agree, again, to it providing a grave danger. That in that contracting COVID-19 is a work-related danger. Again, I just said, what is a workplace? All right, if I go into a building, it's called work. I go into work at Aflac, and I'm sitting there with my work colleagues, and then 5 o'clock rolls around and I clock out. Am I at work anymore? No, I'm still literally in the same exact building, still in the same exact place. So workplace is not well defined. COVID-19 is the same risk as crime, pollution, or other communicable disease. Flatly no. I'm not going to respond to nonsense. A vaccination cannot be done at the end of the day. Does anybody understand biology? All vaccines are undone at some point. All biological exposure wanes. You have to eat food every day. You have to get flu vaccines every year. Natural immunity and vaccine immunity will wane for sure, 100%. So it cannot be undone at the end of the day, biologically wrong. Majority doesn't like the lack of specificity between general risk and occupational risk. They draw some difference between just general risk of just anybody going anywhere versus occupational risk. And again, occupational is like italicized as some big buzzword. Work is occupation, profession is occupation, workplace is not well defined, and you certainly have better chance when you have to go in a place to have your livelihood to be exposed to grave danger, 100%. It is not, quote, it is not our role to weigh such trade-offs about saving 6,500 lives and hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations. And it says, Congress, not Supreme Court responsible. I just flatly disagree. If you call yourself a Supreme Court justice and you say it's not in your legal purview to assess death, mortality in your rulings, then just kick yourself off, resign for being incompetent. Again, then obviously the legal argument is to establish the legality established by Congress. But if everyone's fucking stupid, at some point somebody has to be the adult in the room. Then again, they talk about state authority versus federal government authority. Just discuss that. This court is not a public health authority. I agree, but you should absolutely take in the consequences of your actions. You should take that into consideration. We expect Congress to speak clearly. And they discuss the majors questions doctrine. And it says, OSHA's mandate fails that doctrine's test. I don't have the exact definition of major questions, but just, again, major questions, stuff that affects the vast majority of everybody, which a global pandemic absolutely does. And it says, they emphasize with the people's elected representatives, and I have LOL. Like Tom Cotton, the dude that looks like fucking Gumby, like Mike DeWine, who in the same hand will talk about freedom and liberty, and then say, I don't think cannabis should be for everyone just because of his personal insecurities, and at the same time say he's not a scientist. Those people, elected officials are blindly elected. It has to be competence-based, and they're not. So, just the emphasis on people's elected representatives. I feel like I'm like jerking off in like high school government class about the screeching bald eagle in the back and everyone's waving their American flags real fast. It's like, government, the point of government should function, it should work. And I'll get to that later. Non-delegation doctrine to separate powers. The non-delegation doctrine just means you can't delegate something that is separated by the separation of powers. Congress couldn't say, Congress couldn't pass a law saying the president's no longer a person or no longer in office. The president couldn't issue an executive order saying Congress doesn't count anymore. But the major questions doctrine is just more broad than the non-delegation doctrine. Again, what do you do in major questions about national security? Public versus private and elected officials. Again, I've talked about publicity and privacy quite a bit, but just in general, people move away from privacy. It's really a defense mechanism of insecurity, and so I just didn't like the argument at all there. Both doctrines prevent quote, both doctrines prevent government by bureaucracy, supplanting government by the people. Again, that's another screeching bald eagle comment. Government by the people. Show me one person that has read the fucking Constitution in the past year. Again, I read it probably 4 or 5 times when I'll review my appeals to the Supreme Court. But you have to have competence. And when I just hear government by the people are fucking retarded. The government's incompetent. The Supreme Court is illiterate. Yeah, or maybe it's just a bunch of whiny children running around. So that's a great idea, but we have to be a little more practical, boys and girls. Quote, declarations of emergencies would never end, and the liberties our Constitution's separation of powers seeks to preserve would amount to little. Quote from Gorsuch. Again, a once-in-a-century pandemic is absolutely a fucking emergency, a grave danger, 100%. Would never end. Here's a Supreme Court justice, again, just rattling off Republican talking points. Big government is so bad. Incompetence is bad. People can't fucking do anything is bad. The government's a ton of fucking people. You know, I'm against just making government bureaucracies for government bureaucracies, but just the extremity, the extreme. You should be terrified of big government owning your whole fucking life. Yeah, I have literally no rights. I don't have human rights, which is a big step down from constitutional rights. So just be more practical. So that's really the majority opinion, is basically saying, and again, I'll talk about the Constitution's, whatever liberties established by that. But that was the majority opinion, now going through the dissenting opinion. So Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan were dissenting. Again, Sotomayor demonstrated her great competence without knowing even close facts and stating it in a hearing. Good job. But here's, again, I disagree with everybody. Judge Plumplog speaks for himself. Either vaccine or weekly testing masking. First big thing from the dissent is the mandate actually said you can get the vaccine or weekly testing. Vaccine is the most effective prevention of infection and of transmission. Masks are second, and weekly testing is third. Once you test positive, you've already certainly been contagious at some point. So is testing useful? Certainly. Is testing, it's the third line of defense, and you certainly can be contagious and infectious to other people with just a correct positive test. You can get a false positive, you can get a false negative. So I think weekly testing is the third most, whatever. They say we respectfully disagree. LOL, fuck that. They talk about religious exemptions again. All religious is underdeveloped science. And again, we've talked about that extensively. Again, the last time I was, again, ganged up on for being scientifically illiterate by people thinking I was attacking Christianity when my research would 100% validate Christianity in the most empirical way possible was Christmas. I unified the natural sciences with proof in 150 lectures like 6 years ago. The paper like 5 years ago, and these lectures for like the past 2 or 3 years. People just won't, science scares people. They just won't engage things that they don't understand because of personal insecurity. It offends them, it makes them feel embarrassed, and then they'll just attack you. It has never stopped in my life. 2 weeks to 2 months of never being harassed, ever. Like again, the Fourth Amendment, right against unreasonable searches and seizures. The last time a lawyer violated that confidently was 2 months ago. None of these, quote, none of these requirements is met here, are met here. When you speak do whatever dumb cunt law clerk, you still have to have your subject and your verbs match, guys. Forget the negation. These requirements is met here. These requirements are met here. So it's great to see, again, a basic grammatical error from this lovely opinion. The majority, quote, these are all quotes, the majority does not contest that COVID-19 is a new hazard and physically harmful agent. Just saying that the majority does agree. OSHA's, quote, OSHA's regulates fire exits in planes in places outside of work. I didn't double check that, but if that's true, that's just, again, direct inconsistent from the majority opinion. And then I have some science talks, but then they use, in the dissenting opinion, they use the word diktat, D-I-K-T-A-T, and Stop trying to sound smart. Just say words you know, like error. Don't say I know you got your black jackets on, you're in Washington, D.C., again, the bald eagles are still screeching, and you're all just protecting and serving this wonderful, great nation. just calm down a little bit. Just like be a more normal person. Just, hey, go on a walk, go to the gym, go watch a movie, and the right words you know. And then the majority opinion, I didn't have it written down. They had another one, like ningun. It was just like, again, another fucking not word. But I didn't have it written down. And I have OSHA in parentheses, in reference to, it has previously regulated infectious disease, including by facilitating vaccination. And it has in other contexts required medical examinations and face coverings for employees. Again, if it has, it's, again, direct. Again, does the majority research anything? And again, I just read this yesterday. I don't have time to do it all. I do have some time, but it's just, I'm not going to do the complete work of the Supreme Court you guys should be doing, besides just sitting on your stupid bench and jerking your dicks. Employers principally argue that the standard will disrupt their businesses by prompting hundreds of thousands to leave their jobs, and then far fewer threaten to quit than their jobs and actually do. Again, all those edgy 14-year-olds that cannot be told anything, they cannot hear anything. Their tits are growing a little bit, they're feeling all spunky. Yes, queen, yes, queen. Don't tell me what to do. Yes, queen, yes, queen. And then they're like, oh yeah, shit, I actually need to make some money. But it's just edgy 14-year-olds being defiant against instruction when they shouldn't be. And I'll talk about the science, almost done with the opinion. Underlying everything else in this dispute is a single simple question. Who decides how much protection and of what kind American workers need from COVID? Court or healthcare agency? Neither. A scientific proof. And so, again, don't you guys remember when I put up the literal fundamental theorem of physics on a billboard outside of a major university, and I've been giving lectures since saying that I should be involved in these decisions? And the CDC's been inconsistent, the FDA's been inconsistent, the whiny baby podcasters have been inconsistent, Joe Biden's been inconsistent, the Senate's incompetent, our governors are incompetent. I'm not. And it's provable, it's visceral. The reason I got here is because it's how much science I do. But science should determine the amount of protection American workers need, demonstrated by people with competence. Its members are elected by and accountable to no one, in reference to the Supreme Court's rulings. Again, I agree. I think that was in reference to the 6,500 dead and potential deaths and hospitalizations. And then they use the word usurp, again, trying to sound like the Constitution. And I just have usurp is to what? To commandeer. That would be a historically local logical theorem. So now my thoughts and response with talking points. So again, I just have my first thoughts was they don't write their own opinions. That's an absolute egregious offense from a justice. And then state law is based and rooted in common law. The Second Amendment doesn't give me the right to shoot others. Negligent homicide, reckless endangerment, en masse, bonjour, is a national security threat. Again, the Constitution clearly goes over and above and beyond about protecting against insurrections, but a bunch of en masse negligent homicide, exposing people to other dangers, being reckless, going in and waving a gun in the street even without shooting would get you the police called on you, get you arrested for endangering the public health. State law is based in common law. Common law is not written anywhere. And so when you have that type of event, that is absolutely the jurisdiction of the federal government. And so really my ruling is the mandate is absolutely valid because it is a grave danger. Don't even really care about the OSHA statute. To me, it's a national security threat with demonstrable incompetence and at the highest level for real, as demonstrated by your actions, not my words. And I just have what is war, meaning somewhere in the Constitution. No, I think it's more on treason, but I just have a question: what is war? Like logically, or you say the war on drugs, but a war is a mass killing of people, right? They'd say between nations, but it's just a mass damage to your homeland. And so they use that a lot. People fight a war on this, fight a war on that, and so this is typically kind of like a war on shitty health behaviors. And then just most generally, what should a government do? A government should function. A government should preserve a society. A government should be efficacious. It should do stuff. It shouldn't be a stagnated, again, screeching bald eagle, thinking about your government class, right? And so it's like, reading the Constitution, I'll just give you like some thoughts there, right? Ben Shapiro says he doesn't trust, or Brett Weinstein says he doesn't trust somebody who demonstrates incompetence. Choosing, written by James Madison, another one of our great Federalist Papers writers. He writes choosing, C-H-U-S-I-N-G. So if you write, and it doesn't change until an amendment, until it goes to C-H-O-O-S-I-N-G. So I don't trust a guy who spells choosing like that. Or increasing, E-N, like I-N creasing, but E-N creasing. So again, another great intellectual. The Constitution to me is extremely shit grammar and writing. Again, I read it with the rhythm that sounds like they wrote it in their heads. And so there's a ton of funky punctuation. They go with colons and then dashes, and it's just like, what is this? And so, just to the prestige, could I write a better fucking Constitution linguistically, like with words? Absolutely. Practically doesn't matter. Like I said, it's not like I'm not a strict constitutionalist. But again, all of these, ask any person, they'll be like, have you read the Constitution? Yeah, I did publicly like a couple days ago, and many times when I was appealing to this shit. But linguistically, certainly, but it's not like it's bad. It just needs to be more amendable, and people need to be competent. More than anything, people need to know what the fuck they're doing, and they don't. The treason definition okay, so that was where the war question came from. Treason definition and review of some of the amendments. I'll review the amendments later if there's anything more interesting to say or something interesting arises. But treason in the Constitution is referenced as bringing war against one's own nation. And war, logically, is just not well defined. It's mass killing. So the enemy of war can be anything. A viral agent, another country, an insurrection of your own people. So that's really, treason and war were intimately connected. The role of the Supreme Court is the final appellate court and the only court for original jurisdiction of the Constitution. I originally appealed, I'm going to read the Fifth Amendment because this is actually, when you talk about liberty and freedom, besides the preamble, this is basically the only time it talks about explicitly liberty and freedom for the people itself. The Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on the presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arises in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, semicolon. This is why I originally appealed under the Fifth Amendment, and then I went to original jurisdiction. But original jurisdiction, I'm a very unique case, and most law has been established. But here, semicolon, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, comma, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, semicolon, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation, like this video. But this is really the only place in the constitutional law where it's explicit to the citizens themselves about saying the words life, liberty, or property. The language of the Declaration of Independence, if you're a strict constitutionalist, which most of these people try to argue, then you should never ever reference any sort of ideal from the Declaration of Independence. It's not ratified. Historical document, that's why I said in my last video, it's not really the motivation for the Constitution. The motivation for the Declaration was to free themselves from England, and then they're like, fuck, now we, not fuck, but now we actually have to establish our own governmental system. So, and then again, that wasn't ratified until what, 1787? Once New York stopped holding out. But this is really, like the Fifth Amendment, right, most times referenced for, against self-incrimination, double jeopardy, and due process. But this is really, the Fifth Amendment's your best constitutional argument for personal liberties. Not really sure where I was now. Then I just have common law, constitution, statute, again, as the basis of state law and why the federal government absolutely has jurisdiction. The Declaration versus Constitution, which matters more and why, just talked about that. And then, again, said past that, I'm not a strict constitutionalist, but like the laws are pretty much established. People just need to be more confident in understanding them. And then some more talking points. But talked about the practicality and competence. Just talked about the Fifth Amendment. And And so there might be one or two more references literally to the word liberty, but to citizens themselves, or I might say retained with the citizens, but saying exactly when, life, liberty, property, it's the Fifth Amendment's your best argument. I'm not a strict constitutionalist. What works? Again, I hate grandiose ideals of elected officials, separation of powers, and liberty are wrongly applied. And so again, the separation of powers, again, the major questions doctrine and the non-delegation doctrine, it's a national security threat. It's not a political thing to wave our red flags at. And then I said, don't forget cannabis in my Supreme Court appeal. Remember, I already read it or referenced it. It's posted. But for me, the Article 1, Section 8, Subsection 7, where it says, I have the right to my writings and discoveries, that's still under the section of established in Congress. But practically, right, Congress accredits schools, or at least, I don't know exactly if Congress accredits schools, but they certainly are intimately involved in education, the Department of Education. So you can't steal my property private property without just compensation pursuant to the Fifth Amendment. I should have a direct avenue to publication of my discoveries and writings through one of the accredited schools, and then we're all going to sit here and argue the Constitution or some shit. So that's my review. This is completely wrong. Absolutely was legally justified for a vaccine mandate, and the real reaction is whiny babies that are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 saying, wah, 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 me, wah, wah, don't tell me what to do. So now we're going to review some of that. And so I watched 3 podcasts about, again, sort of relevant to most of the points. But I watched the Patrick Bet-David and Jedediah Bila, who's a podcast, TV host, The View, Fox. I watched some Ben Shapiro, obviously. Gotta shit on Ben Shapiro with the quickness all the time. And I watched another riveting Dark Horse. Dark Horse 111 was a little better. Until the very last scene. Even those credits start rolling, Brett. I'm still watching. I'm the dude watching till the end, bro. But the Jedediah Bila conversation I watched first. The only real point, again, I'm not even saying this to be rude, again, because I'm trying to keep this sort of professional, even though I don't give a fuck about being professional literally ever. But she's 42 years old and she has a 2-year-old. So if I know to having a children is a personal choice, but if you aren't mature enough in your personal life to have a kid till you're 40, and I can't even have a young family anymore because I'm surrounded by people like this. People who really don't mature to like 35 or 40. It is such a stagnated society. But they talk about my body, my choice as a board. Well, she starts off like she's not affiliated with one political party. She's a conservative, but then she really gets into the freedom and liberty part. And again, it's not a liberty. The minute you encroach on somebody else's liberty or freedom or health, it is no longer your liberty. So, and they talk about my body, my choice, as in, abortion versus the vaccine mandate. If you lay down on your back, bust that shit open, torque it for a real nigga, and then take a load, and then pop out a kid, well, how does that affect anybody else besides you? Kind of affects society, but that's actually your choice and your body to have an abortion or not. But a vaccine mandate, and again, both of them agree, like it's the same level of my body, my choice. It isn't your choice. The minute you go into another fucking restaurant or public place, like the 1,000th time, and you're not tested, like you don't know if you're transmissible, and then you give it to somebody else, that's reckless endangerment. Every single fucking time. And so, to see that even as a comparison, absolute Looney Tunes. Absolute Looney Tunes. Then she says Bernie Sanders has a ton of money. I googled it. His net worth's about $3 million, and her net worth's about $2 million. No, I get that probably net worths on there are probably not super accurate, but yeah, big jump from $2 million to $3 million. Bernie Sanders is balling the fuck out with $3 million. $3 million. I think Bernie Sanders is a fucking retard. I think he's a total hypocrite too. But science is meant to be questioned. Jedediah Bila, no, science is meant to be proven, and what is proven should not be questioned, because it's proven. It's what a proof is. You run out of questions, literally. Go read my paper, there's no question marks on it. And so, again, they get to these one-liner sayings from these broken philosophers, and it's just like directly wrong. So that was really the only thing. I watched the whole interview, but that was really the only talking points. And again, but she talks about going into a building for a restaurant and being like told to have a mask or wear a mask or something, and be like, don't encroach on my liberties. Like what?
I looked up the vaccine or the mask efficacy because Ben Shapiro says if you say masks don't work, it would get you kicked off YouTube. And Brett Weinstein and Heather also didn't pull up any data once again this week, but it was about 25% efficacy for cloth masks, about 50% for surgical, and about 90 to 95 plus efficacy for preventing any sort of particulate through the thing. So if you had, I'd been wearing, I just ordered a box of 95s, but I had been wearing a cloth mask out of convenience, really. Like I said, I just didn't know where to buy this shit. It was all, don't buy them for the surgical thing, let alone triple vax boost or vaccinated boosted. But for me, it was just convenience. But I got on Amazon, ordered some. But saying masks don't work will get you kicked off YouTube. Direct quote from Mr. Shapiro. Don't work is an extreme. State the efficacies. Look at some fucking data. And he's like, you're welcome to wear an N95 here at the Daily Wire. It's just like, but if you still wear, like, why would you not want at least a 25% bump if someone wanted to wear a cloth mask, or God forbid you ran out of some N95s, or just any normal day-to-day life shit. But no, either it's extreme. Give me freedom or give me death. It's just like, calm the fuck down and just be reasonable. And this is not reasonable. It just isn't. They state false science every single time. But the Daily Wire sued the Biden administration, and then Ben says they priced themselves out of my applicant pool. Same with your children, Ben. Any business that I ever will be involved in, your children will not be allowed to be hired there at all, just on principles alone. You don't have any of that. So I totally agree. Private businesses can do whatever they want. I'm not, again, economically, private versus private property is an extension of your work, your time. It is an extension of you. But privacy in terms of like data, I don't care about. But totally agree about pricing people out of your applicant pool with dumb posts online, man. I'm talking about personal freedom again, without any constitutional argument. They say liberty, and then he says vaccines do not stop infection. They mostly stop infection. Yes, true. They mostly. Again, my estimate's 50% to 60% stops transmission. Yes, with 63% fully vaccinated, there's just still a lot of shit going on. And so but then we go to extremes. It doesn't work, it does work, efficacies. State those things, percentages. Try your best. They spent a whole hundreds of thousands of dollars spent petitioning. Wow. Don't spend it all in one place, Ben. And then obesity versus first pandemic in 100 years. Again, just some comparison Ben makes about people making, again, my choice, my body. I can put food in my body. Yes, that's completely your choice. You're not going to transmit your caloric intake to me via telepathy, via the aliens. It's not going to happen. So that, again, another just complete weird parallel drawn there. That might be the end of the Jedediah PBD podcast and the Ben Shapiro. Now just some thoughts from the Dark Horse, and we'll get a little off COVID here, and then I'll respond to the Yaron Brooks and Yoram Hazony debate from Lex Friedman's podcast. So they start off, the Dark Horse 111 starts off by talking about mask etiquette and efficacy, and again I stated the study review percentages, but Heather's like, the mask is a simple object. How hard would it be to use? Yeah, it's not hard. What they mean is just, again, when you go to a store, someone just literally starts talking, and like genuinely just like dips below their nose, stuff like that. It's practical. But then they say the great damage from masking children. And I have like, what? Because again, let kids be kids. Let the children run free. Like the great damage of the 25, 50 to 90 to 95% efficacy of not being exposed to other people's particulate, which should be for any infectious disease. Biologist that you are. But in-person versus remote learning, what are my thoughts just in general? Again, my learning process is a little different than everybody else's. Certainly some value to in-person learning, but I really just personality, personal driven, personal curiosity, group projects guided by a teacher. School is an abomination. Brett Weinstein, totally agree, bro. Totally agree. Sentiment in teachers. Again, this is always a function of insecure people and underdeveloped people and incompetent people. Cause of death, hundreds death post-flu vaccine versus thousands. This was someone from Congress questioning, a representative questioning maybe Walensky and the VAERS system post-COVID deaths versus Viagra might help COVID on Sean Hannity. So again, all of these things I just see as underlying cellular health, and it's just an introduction of a stimulus, right? The first one, the Viagra might help COVID on Sean Hannity. No, but what happens is you put a new molecule into your body, it's going to kickstart all of your systems. So you're going to get a little more immune response, you're going to get a little more heart rate, you're going to get a little more blood pressure. So that's what's happening. And right, you'll have stories about people like literally on their deathbed, and they'll get like a final shot or an IV, and they'll like poke up for like a minute and then actually die. It's just a knee-jerk reaction for real, biologically. And so I don't even see, but Heather's grilling how could Walensky not have these numbers? And then she literally says, I don't have numbers either. So again, hypocrisy, face value, direct, and then they just keep rambling on like idiots. This one wasn't too bad. I wouldn't have said I would sue you to the last comment on this one, Bren. I said, don't say vaccines don't work. They do. And again, if you want to speak against me, man, we don't want your lawyers coming after our lawyers. I'm my own lawyer. Like, for fucking sake. And so you get the whole team with me. But that's what's occurring. And they call their informed dissent. They are demonstrably incompetent. Brett, just like you want it, once the CDC demonstrates incompetence, oh, and then you guys are preaching vitamin D? Yeah, no shit, bro. You shouldn't be deficient at anything. So, like, yeah, big breakthrough. Great thought. Awesome, man. And then, oh yeah, Heather, get outside after you guys watch me walk all day, which is true. But, little whiny babies. Boosters and natural immunity both will certainly wane like all biological exposure. Already talked about that. Randomized controlled trials as the gold standard. Methodology, execution, and correct conclusion drawing is the gold standard. But they talk about, some bimbo wrote an article about vaccine injury. Again, I am certain what vaccine injury is. It's groupthink, it's shared insecurity, and it's self-validation of all these underreported mega symptoms and brain fogs and tinnitus, and it's not. It's not. But and then some bimbo wrote some consilience, so she invented a fake word. Again, this is literally speciality in practice. Take data that you don't understand, draw conclusions you don't understand, literally invent a fake word, doublespeak, just like 1984, and then you can't say what actually is going on. Like, literally, actually. But they cite it as like, look at all this evidence, look at this great, well thought out research. I can't stop instinctually stating logical proofs for real. So I think my research kind of trumps that a little bit. Ancient Peruvian subfossil with metal skull plate that healed, assuming it's valid, as they discussed as well. Experimental commoner versus elite with a serious injury. What would be more likely? And I said, does that surprise me? No. Do ancient surgeons surprise me? No. Technology in ancient civilizations surprise me? No. And so, commoner or elite with serious injury? My guess, if a total guess, but I would say an elite. It really just depends on how common the practice was, how common the surgery was. But ancient surgery does not surprise me. Chickens are plant-based because they eat them. Heather says chickens are chickens, totally agree. Brett says, I'm going to have to correct you there, and doesn't. And says, chickens are plants because they eat them. You are not what you metabolize. I'm a human, I eat chickens. I didn't turn into a chicken. Good try, Brett. Ancient drugs being unreproducible. They talked about some meeting or just some article about like people going somewhere and turning up at a party or something and then not being able to reproduce, like it was like a drug-laced beer or something. And the only reason I can see that as even plausible is just locality. Again, if the world's not, I can get any grain or anything, our system, or our commodities are a lot more consolidated. So it would just be either some sort of unique process that maybe could be patented at the USPTO, or just a local ingredient that isn't grown anywhere else. If you can't reproduce the effects somewhere else, the most likely explanation to me is just a very wild variety of some psychoactive substance that's introduced into the beer, and when you go back to your hometown, you can't find the material. That's my guess. Vocalization, language, and intelligence in sperm whales. I didn't really. They talked about something there. Again, a lot of species speak. Many or most, all things considered, not sure. Vocalization is definitely limited by physics, by mass, by resonance, for sure, 100%. But many of them don't speak. Is it many or most? Don't have a good guess there. And then he says, and then right at the rolling credits, he says, vaccines aren't safe and effective. Yes, they are. You're directly being sued for that, Brett. If you need to be an activist about masks, Brett and Heather, right? They talk about like, if you need to be an activist about masks, about, Heather's all upset that the people are compliant. Do not comply, do not comply. Wah, wah, wave your binkies really high. But then they're going to march on the Capitol about the vaccines and the masks. So if you need to be an activist about masks, Brett and Heather, the activists about anti-masks. Literally. So, yeah, they're a hoot to watch. Absolutely goofballs. Now, a couple more thoughts, just getting pretty much completely away from COVID. There was a nationalism debate versus Yaron Brooks and Yoram Hazony on Lex Friedman's podcast. So certainly this episode's gonna be a long one. Camera battery's getting dead. One camera, one battery. Got to wrap it up soon. But is the Constitution made for individual rights? Brooks says yes. Hazany says no. No, it's for the establishment of the United States government. Individualism versus conservatisms to groups. What makes people feel groups? Locality, speciality, bonding with your mates. That's how we determine value. 100% agree. What is freedom? Freedom in its most general sense is choice. Do I believe all freedom is good? Fuck no. So I think Yaron said that, agree. And they have coercion versus freedom is too simplistic. Hazony, totally agree. I don't like his explanation about honor versus dishonor, but totally agree that freedom versus coercion is too simplistic. Coercion is force. Correct biological proof is not force, it's sensible, it's reasonable. When is selfishness good and bad? It's good when you're doing benefit for yourself, it's bad when you're doing harm to another person. Totally agree with the definition. My functional definition of selfishness is just something that benefits yourself. But with the minute you cross over somebody else's ability to consent, their ability to be selfish, then it's bad. Friendship bound by shared insecurity instead of shared values. They seem a little skeptical about the great values of our society after we just scapegoated a guy since childhood for 20 years. But friendships are bound by insecurity instead of shared values when everyone's insecure. Judaism doesn't have tropes like turn the other cheek that are in Christianity, and they're both Jewish. And again, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, and who gives a fuck? It's about equality. What you do to me, I should at least be able to do to you if I so choose. And again, that's really the historical and biblical difference between, again, God, Aaron, Yahweh, Lord, and Jesus, the shepherd, or the sheep. But that's just, again, another reason demonstrating Jesus was, again, more sentimental, more forgiving for, hit me again, I'll just stand there like a bitch. And God's like, nah, cut your fucking hands off. And I'm more on the cut your fucking hands off team. People are healthy and happy when they have identity and a hierarchy. Correct. And it's just valid fact. Again, that's why I cannot feel happy. Not because I'm sad, not because I'm emotional, not because I'm depressed, because I'm literally not allowed to have any sort of respect and any sort of thing. And then, quote from my old neighbor, so I don't have many friends, Prashant, but you get a paycheck. Friendship to me, the most basic level is respect. I do work, my Fifth Amendment says you're not allowed to take my property without compensation, which you guys do every day. I don't have any friends. Well, I don't have friends in the sense of paying me money for my work either, or anything. So being validated in a hierarchy to any social being is the fundamental driver of self-identity for real. And if not, and if you're at the highest of the hierarchy or the bottom, if you're the scapegoat, you can't feel anything. You just can't. So totally, yep. They talk about the Hegelian Dialectic. This is what I was talking about when I told you the story about my English teacher, Mrs. Odie, saying, look how terrible this paper was. But my history teacher, Mr. Ulrey, said, here's the Hegelian Dialectic. So I might cover that a little bit. I don't have even written down what it is, but just again, it's synthesis of logic. It's syllogism, which I do all day. And then Hazony says, I'm not a rationalist. I'm an empiricist. Empiricism produces rationality, so it's just false logic. And is love of country good? By Lex. Really just depends. A lot of people are mature and honorable. This is not an honorable society. It never could be. But then, yes, it would be good to have good culture and respect your ancestors. We're just a bunch of children running around, chickens with their heads cut off. Can't stop, won't stop. Camera's probably dying soon. Hopefully this is still going. But this is going to be a long episode. Those are all my thoughts, relevant talking points. So thank you for watching Language, Litigation, and Integration Part 84, Vaccine Mandate.